Hello, welcome to episode 174 in this series where I am programming an NES game live on Twitch from scratch. Get started with, I posted this on Twitter to kind of summarize how I'm feeling right now. If you ever saw this episode of The Simpsons, you'll know that Homer was trying to build a pool, but instead he built a barn. But yeah, this is how I feel about a lot of my game development projects that I've worked on. You know, do a substantial amount of work and kind of take a step back, and it's like, yep, it's a game engine, but it's not a game. Not yet. I feel like that's where we are right now. Like, I've got a lot of components and pieces and capabilities in the game engine, but right now it's essentially just, you know, it's just a series of capabilities with some test code and some test level data, and it works, right? But it's not a game. But the potential is there. So the dilemma I'm having right now is, while I'm sure everybody who watches this is interested in the NES development side of things, the game development side of things is maybe potentially less interesting to watch, which maybe sounds strange, but like, it's something that is incredibly fiddly and not as easily explained, at least for me, being not an expert in game development like someone like, you know, Jonathan Blow or Will Wright, or pick a person who's developed or designed a really successful, excellent game and delivered on sort of the promises that they said they would. And you know, that to me is like the challenge in game development. So I definitely want feedback from all of you who watch the stream and who watch the videos on YouTube, and you know, come back time and again after they're posted, because I know there are a number of you who watch these. My sense of what I want to do here is, it's 2022. The first video that I posted of development on Cerulean Ascension, or what would essentially become Cerulean Ascension, I believe is it late 2019? Let's take a look. I'm going to go to my channel and we're going to take a look at where episode 1 is. Now, episode 1 of NES Programming, beyond all reason, has 36,000 views, which, you know, for a large channel isn't a lot, but for someone doing NES programming on stream, it is, to me, incredible that it's got over 36,000 views. It was actually January of 2018, so this is the 4th year, 2022. And you know, and in terms of like actual development time working on this, with each of these videos being, you know, potentially up to 3 hours long. I've said this before, but hey, Matt, you know, the actual amount of time I've spent doing development isn't as long as 4 years, obviously. I think I've worked it out. It's like 2 or 3 months of real development time, because I've done pretty much everything live on stream. There are a few exceptions to what I've done where it was not on stream. So yeah, let me know what you think about, well, the following. So my plan is to still do streaming, but to do it less frequently, to stream probably once a month. Continue to do work, continue to post update videos on the progress of the game, simultaneously to kind of highlight the NES development side of things, but also because there are people who have pre-ordered the game and have access to the code and will therefore also get a ROM of the game. I don't want them to think that all development has stopped. That's not the intention. In fact, the intention is the opposite. I'd like to finish this game this year. The challenge is that with only being able to do the streaming or development on stream, then I'm beholden to, you know, 2 days a week and whatever time I get on the stream those 2 days a week. And it's always in the evening and it's always late. And that means that when I am done, if it's a particularly late night, it's well after midnight. And, you know, I don't mind doing it, but I also think that we're at a point where what I've done in the game engine code is sufficient enough that anybody who's gone through and watched the bits and pieces of this will kind of have an idea of what I've done. And then they can do whatever they want to do. Now, that, again, isn't to say that I won't stream. I definitely want to stream. I enjoy interacting with people. And there are people who have been on the streams lately who've asked a lot of questions and interacted a lot. And so I'm kind of torn about, you know, streaming less because I've really enjoyed that. So to that end, I would like the streams that I do actually participate in, and maybe it won't be once a month, maybe I'll do it every 2 weeks or something like that. We'll see what people think. I'd like them to be more Q&A style. Basically, I will show what I've done and talk about any particularly challenging technology things like, you know, tricky algorithms or revamps to the way that the engine works, and then do Q&A, whether it's about the game or not. It can be more specific to just NES dev. That's fine too. And then what I'd also like to do is spend more time working on the zero-page episodes, because the last zero-page episode I posted was quite a while ago, and I know people have really liked those videos. And I actually think that those videos are way more important and way more useful than me sitting here puzzling out problems to some extent. Like, it's good for people to see the process, but the actual 0 pages and being able to understand how to develop a game and work through the challenges related to the development of a game, or the setup for an NES game, to me is better served through the quote-unquote shorter videos. I mean, the longest one is 58 minutes. But again, this is another video that if you look at the stats, you can see 34, almost 34,000 views. Similar to the first one, which covers the NES architecture at a high level. So that to me tells me that people are really interested in this kind of info. Even episode 5, Hello World, 4,000 views. Again, not a lot for a big channel, a lot for NES development. Hello Mario, 12,800 views. And that's not to say that the statistics mean everything, because they don't, but I'm trying to do this in a way that's smart and serves me and you, the people who are actually coming to see this content. And make sure that it's actually benefiting you in terms of actually learning something. And we're at a point, I think, that me sitting here and puzzling through level design and enemy placement and stuff like that is not why you're here, I think. I mean, there are plenty of channels that talk about that kind of stuff, you know, game design and game design theory. But again, I could be wrong. So let me know, you know, there are some people here in chat right now. You know, let me know in the comments below the video when I post this, if you're watching the recording. But, you know, like I said, my goal is to finish this in 2022, and I don't know how that's going to happen, if I'm going to continue to stream only the 2 nights a week. And I could just randomly stream whenever I'm able to work on it, but I actually think that that's detrimental, because it, one, potentially, well, it first of all then limits when I can stream. You know, if I'm just working on this during my lunch break at work, that's one thing. You know, that's personal time that I can do something for an hour real quick. Streaming is a whole different thing. I don't think that's really appropriate to be doing. And then, like, you know, if I have an hour here or there, instead of streaming that, I can actually focus on getting something really important done, versus having the stream and having to explain exactly what I'm doing. And because, you know, every video starts out with probably me sitting here doing this, just kind of talking for about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, introducing what we're going to be doing, recapping what we did already, explaining what my approach is going to be. I try to be pretty clear unless my time is short and I know I need to make it a really quick video, and even then I'm not really good at that sometimes. But, you know, I try to be really clear about what our approach is going to be and why and how, and you know, make it as useful as possible. But, you know, I think the analytics show that the videos that people are most interested in watching, and watching completely, are the videos where I'm solely focused on explaining a particular topic, and not just the videos where I am, you know, sitting here debugging problems and working through problems. As interesting as that might be, you know, for a retrospective or something like that. And, you know, yeah, that's basically what I'm thinking on that. So anybody in chat, let me know what you think about that. I'm curious to hear. I pose this to the people who are part of the Patreon too, in terms of, you know, what they think in terms of what content they want to see, since they are supporting this to some extent. And it's kind of split. Of the votes that I've gotten, I've got half of them saying that they want the streams and the 0 pages, and the other half are saying, I don't care, I just want 0-page episodes. Oh, that was the other thing I was going to look at. When was the last 0-page episode? I want to say it was last year, which is frustrating to me, and I'm sure frustrating to others who want to see more of those videos, because time and time again I get people telling me how useful those are, and that they wish that they could get more of that content, of that sort of boiled down content, compared to the longer streams, which are harder to follow. Yeah, so it was, let's see, May of last year. No, May of 2020. So it's not even last year. It was the year before. It's close enough that we could say it's, you know, last year, sort of. We were 5 days ago. But so I'd really like to move on and do more of those too, and those just take time. Yeah, that's exactly right. I think the first few episodes are pretty applicable to any game, and on the NES, and talk about the high-level concepts of NES programming pretty broadly, and give a good explanation, especially that first episode, which is why it has so many views. But, you know, it gets really down into the nitty-gritty. right? Pretty quickly. So unless someone's really invested in understanding how this game specifically works, you know, I'm getting to the point where I don't know how much value there is left in, because like I said, you know, we've got this engine here that's pretty capable. It's got a lot to it, you know, and there are going to be additional changes I need to make for optimizations we've talked about, but, you know, the core of it is there. So now it's like, we're down to like, how do I make this an actual game that people will want to play and have fun playing? And I don't think that that's something that I feel comfortable streaming and talking about until maybe after the fact, once I've come to conclusions about what I want to do. I think that probably makes more sense, because, you know, everything I'm going to be doing is just very much kind of groping in the dark to try and figure out what is the right thing to do. So, and then there are going to be other things that are related to the game and related to content that I have to put into the game that will potentially spoil certain things about the game. I know there are people who play shooters and literally don't care about anything other than playing the shooter and the score and completing the game, but there will be story, and I've talked about before that there will be a mode where you can skip any story and you just play through the game, just to completely bypass any of that stuff. Kind of like in, I think, Guardian Legend, you can skip all the overhead sequences, right? You can just play only the shooter sequences. So anyway, yeah, so I actually don't really have anything to work on specifically tonight. Like, there are a couple of bugs here and there that we could talk about, but I actually don't even know that they're worth tackling right now. I really want to get a sense of what people think about what I'm talking about here and what my proposal is, because it's important to me that, you know, I'm providing information that is useful to people, but it's also important to me that I'm not wasting my time. I've got this project, I've got a couple other projects that I'm working on simultaneously, as well as my full-time job. So time is short, and in thinking about where I am and where I'd like to be with this, I would really like to finish this game this year. And that's not to say that I'm going to rush it. Like, if it turns out I need to work on it till January of next year, that's fine. My intention is not to rush it through and get it done, you know, on some arbitrary deadline that compromises the quality of it. But, you know, as it stands, I'd like to do periodic streams, again, to kind of go over where we are with the game, answer any questions people have. I will do, in between those streams, I will do update videos talking about, you know, progress being made on the game, so people feel comfortable that it's being worked on. Like I said, for those who have pre-ordered it, so that I don't end up in radio silence. And then I'm going to work on more zero-page episodes. You know, part of, and I think I've mentioned this before, but if not, in the spirit of transparency, you know, part of doing these streams was to kind of hold myself accountable to do the work and make progress, because I was concerned that, you know, I'd have a hard time focusing on getting this stuff done and making progress to the point where we could actually build the game. You know, that I didn't want it to fizzle out, and it seemed like a good way for me to keep myself on a rhythm and a schedule. And I did lose about a year's worth of work, because We had a baby, which we weren't expecting. If you had told me in 2018 that we were going to have another baby, I would have said you were crazy, because our daughter was already 6 years old, going on 7. And so it was kind of, we figured that was it. We were done having any more kids. So that kind of threw a wrench into the plans. But, you know, obviously that I don't regret that at all, because it was important to be with him and help my wife and spend that time with him and focus on him. So that's 20 minutes of me rambling about this. I'll take any other questions or thoughts that anybody on stream has right now. But I don't, like I said, I don't really have a plan right now for any actual development content tonight. You know, the week I was off, this is what I was thinking about the whole time. You know, how am I going to finish this game? How am I going to provide development content that actually makes sense for people, because we've reached that critical point that, you know, that we have, where we have the structure and the bones of a game, or a game engine, but not the actual game. One thing I know I have to fix is the background collisions are wonky. There's some sort of issue where it is seeing collisions that aren't there. So I was showing this stuff to my wife earlier, and the ship crashed into nothing. So that needs to be fixed. But I suspect that that's probably pretty straightforward. It's definitely something to do with the scrolling and the repeat scrolling, and, you know, swapping back and forth between those modes. There's also the bug with the enemy ship where, because of where it's placed and the speed that it's traveling at, it gets past the end of the screen but doesn't despawn from active processing for some reason. So you end up with a ship that's scrolling over and over and over again on screen. But like, I'm pretty proud of how much progress we've made with the core engine at this point. You know, it's doing quite a fair bit, and we are now at a good point where we can, you know, start actually building game and story content. My plan for the next 0-page episode is to talk specifically about the PPU and really zero in on the way that you interact with the PPU, how it works through you know, memory mapping and communicating via the addresses, and talking about, you know, best practices in terms of, you know, NMI updates versus outside of the NMI, and things to watch out for, like things that we saw here with the scrolling, and when I updated the PPU while we were in the process of drawing, and how that messed up the smoothness of the scrolling. I saw a tutorial about using individual bits of a byte for map data instead of like 1 byte per tile. But so I'm using 1 byte per metatile. So if we pause the game for a second, I mean, there's a couple, depending on the kind of map that it is, that could work. But like, if you look at the map here, also, if you want to, if you can send me or let me know where that is, I'd be curious to see. No, I haven't talked about the stack, but that would be potentially interesting to cover as well and talk about. One thing that I know some folks have brought up about my videos is that I haven't covered really anything about the 6502, the CA65 configuration file and what you need to do for different mappers and stuff like that. And I deliberately avoided talking about that stuff just because when you're getting started with the NES, like none of that stuff makes sense unless you really understand the NES at a pretty low level. So I was trying to focus on how do you just get something running and on screen. So, you know, I purposely left out any discussion of that, but I definitely need to get back to that too. So Miralupa, you're talking about, you know, the stack in terms of like, you know, content in the 0 page, or are you just asking in general? But so Johnny, in terms of what you were talking about, like, you know, I've got these 4 tiles here, right? These are 4 individual tiles in the name table. But if you look at my map here, those 4 tiles are actually 1 tile here. So this is the meta tile. It's just one byte that represents these 4 tiles. And so that provides us some ability to, you know, save space, because we're compressing things down and using fewer byte values to represent the map. And then additionally, because of the way that name tables work, each of these 16 by 16 squares is one part of the attribute grid. So the attribute grid is 32 by 32, and then each quadrant of the attribute table is a different set of palette color possibilities, right? You can choose one of the 4 background palettes. And so it made it easier also to work with. Originally, I had done 32 by 32 just to make it really, really simple, because then every single one of these is the same color. But in talking with Jordan, who did the artwork that we're looking at here, he I'm laughing because I'm saying he convinced me, but he really just kind of like made it really clear that he felt like there was no real good option not to work with 16 by 16 meta tiles. The 32 by 32 approach was simply because I was a little bit intimidated by the prospect of working with 16 by 16. But at some point in one of the episodes, we reworked all of that to work with 16 by 16 from 32 by 32. So that wasn't too bad. It took probably 2 or 3 episodes of working on it to get it fixed. And if you take that into context, that's like, you know, a day's worth of work that I spent trying to figure that out and get that working. So I encountered a few push accumulator to stack stuff. Haven't delved into it yet. So yeah, so basically the main reason that you'd use the push is for temporary storage of, well, there are a couple of possible reasons you would use it. One way you could potentially use it is, like I was saying, for temporary storage, so that, for example, if you know that you've got to use A for an operation, but you need the value that you had in A up until that point. So, like, for example, in this case, we actually need the value that Y has, but there's no push Y to stack. There's only push A to stack. So we transfer Y to A, and then we push A onto the stack. Now, we could have just as easily done something like store Y to a variable. But the problem, or the challenge with something like that, is that if you're not using a distinct variable for that work, like in another programming language, you might just store that value into like a temporary variable and you know, not even think about it, right? But in assembler, because you don't have the same kind of freedom to just declare variables anywhere, you have to be a little bit more careful about where your temporary storage is. And in the case of, you know, creating, like, I've got a bunch of like temp 3, temp 1 or whatever. It's possible that those are used for other things. Like there's only so many that I'm going to set up. I'm not going to set up, you know, temp 1 through temp 16 or have an array of temps that I use, because that's going to get really confusing really quickly. Like I tried to purposely keep it down to 3 because that seemed like even that might potentially be too much. And on the flip side, I don't want to have them be like purpose declared temporary variables that, like, yes, it's only 1 byte, but it's 1 byte that's only used in one part of the code for a very short period of time. It's just a waste of memory. And when you only have 2K of RAM, you know, not that we're running out, I just, you know, figured it makes sense to try and be a little bit more precious with that memory if possible. So that's where the stack is kind of useful, is you can say, okay, well, we need to save the value of y because of whatever we were doing here. So because we can't push y onto the stack, we'll transfer the value to a. We don't care what the value of a is, so we'll transfer the value of y to a and push it onto the stack. So that saves it. And the stack obviously is in that region, what is it, the 2FF down region. So if we go into the debugger for a second, the stack pointer is at FF, and you know, and then the base of that address is, yeah, the base of that address is 2. So this whole region of 2, you know, 200 to 2 FF is your stack area potentially. Now you could run into a problem where your stack grows so big that it actually clobbers data that's in your 200 region, which you don't want. Actually, Matt, if you're still on, I can look this up if you don't remember or haven't thought about this, but I guess there's no limitation, right? The stack register will just keep decrementing every time you push. So you could do what I'm saying, but generally you don't want your stack to get that large. But right, there's no limitation where it's going to stop it from going all the way to 200. And then if you run out of space if you hit 200, that's basically going to be considered a stack overflow, right? Where the next time you try to push something onto the stack register rolls over, which means that you've gone back to here. And if you've gone this far, then you're potentially going to overwrite this value, which is a bad thing. So generally that, unless you've got some sort of weird, crazy, complex call structure, that shouldn't happen. And if that's happening, it's because you're pushing, excuse me, it's because you're pushing onto the stack and not pulling the contents back off the stack. And we've run into that a couple of times where we've overflowed. So yeah, so it's just temporary storage, right? I'm just pushing this y, the value of y onto the stack. And then once I'm done doing whatever I'm doing and operating on probably the player collision data, I'm reading from the player collision data. Once I'm done, at some point here, there should be a corresponding, oh, here it is. So once I'm done operating on this data here, then I'm going to do a pull A and then transfer A to Y, right? So there's a whole corresponding step of, you got to pull it off the stack and then transfer it wherever it needs to go, right? And then we know that it's got the right value to look at this meta-tile collision here. So right now, this game is set up to, and the mirror loop, let me know if that was clear enough in terms of the description. Right now, this is set up to have 4, so what is that, 64K of storage. But technically with the header I'm using, I believe I can have up to 512 let's go to the wiki. So let's look at NES Mapper. Sorry, I'm just looking. I don't remember the header format off the top of my head. I think I've got, let's see, there's NES, and then the first is NES followed by 1A. Okay, so then 1A, that's the program character RAM. Oh, so flag 6 mapper. Lower nibble of the mapper, which is set to 2, and then the upper nibble would be in the next byte. So it's 22 hex is my mapper, which is what, 34? Yeah, BNROM. So BNROM 128K with 32K bank sizes. So I have basically a two 32K banks or 4 16K banks. If you look at NES, we've looked at this before. I've closed all my windows accidentally. If we look at this, you'll see there are 4 16K banks defined here. And 2 of the banks I haven't used any of the storage in. But this first one is pretty full. I mean, some of that comes from the level data, right, that we haven't done anything with. If we look at it in the emulator, if you look at the NES header, you can see it says 64K. So let's see, it makes sense, but I can't imagine using. Well, I mean, it's really just about convenience versus being short on RAM. Like, I mean, it is taking up RAM, right? So to be clear, the stack grows down from that 2FF location. If we go back to this here, just want to confirm that I'm not misstating something. There's another reason why you use the stack, which I'll get to in a second. It's indirect. I'm just talking about direct stack references. Where is it? Increment X, transfer X to S. The stack is always on page 1. Is it 1FF? It could be 1FF. Oh yeah, you know what? Yeah, see, this is why I wanted to look this up, because I was well, but then why does it have this value? Let's see here. So if we go to 2FF, 1FF, B4 2, okay, I guess it is. All right, so I guess it is 1FF. I don't know why I doubted the documentation, but anyway, so it's in this range of memory. And again, it comes down to mirror loop. If you're, rather than using a dedicated variable for temporary storage, or having a huge number of temporary variables that you're using all over the place that then you have to keep track of what they do, it's a useful way of temporarily storing data for whatever it is you're trying to do. The other reason that you might want to use it is in a subroutine where you are going to be modifying the, some of your registers, or the value of a variable that you need to maintain once you come out of the subroutine. So for example, in my NMI code, I want to make sure that when I come out of the when I'm in the NMI, I want to make sure that I come out of the NMI without having modified A, X, or Y for whatever code is currently executing, because remember that NMI is an interrupt, so it can happen at any time. So I don't want it to be that I get my NMI called and then I jump back into the code that I was calling, and these registers are messed up, and so whatever I was doing is now going to be messed up. Like, let's say I was loading a value into A and then adding 5, and then NMI gets triggered, and then I jump back, and now the value of A is totally different than what it was when I had the NMI trigger, right? So then any evaluation of the value of A is going to be incorrect. So what that means then is that I've got to store that somehow, and the easiest way is to use the stack. You push A, transfer X to A, you push A, transfer Y to A, and you push A, and then when you're done, you pull them out. Yes, you could store them, but at that point, then you've got to have dedicated variables for every time you want to do that. And if you need to do it for multiple subroutine calls, like let's say in the NMI, I need the same behavior to occur when I call, let's see, where is a subroutine that I call in here? So then let's say I call, load level within NMI. In load level don't want that to modify the values of A, X, and R. If I don't use the stack, then I've got to create 3 new variables that are specific to only load level for that purpose, versus just pushing those values onto the stack and then pulling them off before I do my return from load level, so that when I come back to here, the values of A, X, and Y are unchanged. Yes, register values at the start and the end of the interrupt code. The other thing that the stack is used for, which you don't have, you can't have interrupts happen within interrupts. At least I don't believe that's possible. I mean, let's put it this way. It shouldn't be happening in your code. There's no reason that I could think of that you would want the interrupt to occur, within your interrupt. Like, you might have an interrupt for the horizontal scan line complete if you're using like MMC3. That interrupt shouldn't get triggered when you're in NMI, because you're not rendering anymore. You're done. rendering, and you have now this time period before the next frame to prepare the PPU for whatever is next, right? But what was I going to say? Oh, so the other thing that goes into the stack is when you call a subroutine, the address that was that you were just at gets put into the stack by the JSR instruction, because that's how RTS knows how to get back to where the JSR operation occurred. So I'm trying to find a good spot for, yeah, we can do this one here. So just as an example, we'll restart the game. So you can see right now in the stack, we're already in load title screen, but our address is 80DF. And then we're going to call enable rendering, sorry, 80E2. And then I'm going to step in. You're going to see that 80E4, which is the next address that would get executed, is pushed into the stack here. So we have 80E4. And so we're going to go through here and execute this code, and then RTS is going to pull these two values off of the stack, and we'll know to then jump to that address, and that brings us back to this RTS, which will then do the same thing. It'll pull off B427 and jump us to B427, or in this case actually B428, because it adds one, which is this code here. Yes, it is. It can be either or, and so the benefit of let's start with two things. So the danger of it is that you accidentally push something onto the stack but don't pull it, and then you do an RTS and then you return to the wrong location. Like that's happened in stream when I was working on something. You know, we had an extra byte on the stack, and we pulled that extra byte and part of the address off the stack, and then ended up in the wrong place. But that's also how process game state is able to do what it's doing, where we refactor the code, right? So we have this table of addresses for the different game states that we support. Those game states are just offsets into that table of addresses, and we can push those addresses into the stack and then execute an RTS, which will take those addresses off the stack and jump to it like we had called a subroutine. So we did this at when we were working on this code here, but if we load the game state and pull the address out of this table and push it, you see that we get 8B64, and then we call RTS, and that's going to push us into this process title screen location, which is what we want right now because that's what we're doing. So it allows us to do almost like a polymorphic virtual function call in like C++, where you know that you have some sort of function that exists on some object, but you don't know which one it is until runtime. It's the same exact principle. Yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about. So this is exactly that. We're manipulating the stack to ensure that we jump to this location based on the game state variable. So it gives us that ability to write more dynamic code than we would otherwise have, versus what we were doing before, where we had a bunch of basically like if else, right? So if thens, where we said if the game state is this, then jump here. If the game state is this, then jump there. If the game state is that, then jump there. Instead, we have this really nice compact check here that looks at the game state, looks up the address from this table, and then just uses RTS. You can see it pushes the address onto the stack before doing the RTS to give us that capability. Johnny, where did you send that link? I didn't see it. If you sent it to me, unless you emailed it to me, I I didn't look at my email. The only thing I can think of off the top of my head with the 1-bit for the map is that the map is pretty basic, and so it's either like the tile is on or off, and so essentially you're rendering a tile or you're not, and it's, you know, doesn't have a lot of different values that are displayed, or maybe like there's each different section has only 2 possible tiles. Obviously then you can compress it quite a bit, because you can say, you know, like an entire row of 8 tiles is you know, that's 1 row of 8 tiles, that's only 1 byte in the storage. And then if you have 32 across, right, that's 32, so that's only 4 bytes across, and then it's, what is it, 30 down, so you'd have, you know, 30 rows of 4 bytes, which is 120 bytes, right, which isn't, that's not that much to store it. And so what you would do is, actually, you might see it if you do it this way. I used to, you know, do stuff where I was manually manipulating, you know, the map data of something by just looking at the raw content. But like, you could see how you might draw like a wall by doing this, right? If it's just single bits. If I make that bigger. So like, you can sort of almost visually see how that would look on screen if you were to use individual bits. But then of course, these are actually individual bytes that you then have to translate that into something that's one byte short. But anyway, the point is you have to translate that into just numeric values. So if we did that for starters here, won't do it for all of them, but like, you know, this one, it would get translated 1, 2, 4. So this would become 4, and that would become 4, and that would become 4. That would become 4, and then we have 1 and 2 and 4 are the bits set here. So that's 7, because it's 1, 2 is 3 plus 4 is 7, right? So you just like you'd maybe make a tool to do that for you, so you didn't have to deal with those numbers directly yourself, if that makes any sense. But there might be an alternative approach that I'm not aware of that they're proposing, and I'd be curious to see what it is. Yeah, so if you guys have any more questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap here. I'll be curious to see what folks say about what I said in the beginning. Hopefully, I'll get a decent amount of feedback from people. Like I said, I definitely want to make sure that I'm making these videos valuable, because right, there's no point in recording them if people aren't getting value out of them. So just yeah. Yeah, it's the same thing as in the Patreon. I was just asking about what the value of the streams are if I'm not going to be doing if I'm going to be doing mostly like sort of game design stuff and not just hardcore programming like I've been doing on the streams. Yes, you did. And just to clarify, since you were late to the stream, like I said, I'm not going to completely not stream anymore, but it's going to be more focused on like updates and question and answer type stuff. And then I'll do short, little recap videos weekly of the content that I've updated in the game, so people can see that I've like made progress, and then spend more time focused on creating zero-page videos instead of making these stream videos. All right, well, looks like no more questions. For now, let's... Oh. Yeah, I know. I've gotten that feedback before too, but like I said, my concern with the game design part of it is that I'm not really equipped to speak with any authority on like game design. I feel like, and that part is going to be a lot more fuzzy, and me kind of spending time being unsure of what I'm doing. And while I haven't always been 100% sure of what I'm doing with the programming stuff here, I at least generally have a good idea and plan, even if it doesn't work out the way I expect it to 100% of the time. Sorry if there's noise coming through on the microphone. I'm shifting and bumping the mic at the same time. So, but like I said, I also feel that there's value in finishing the project. Yeah. But we'll see. Maybe the overwhelming response is people want these streams more than I think that they do, and then I'll have to come up with a new plan. Potentially. I think, though, the challenge there is, if this was just something I was doing for fun, with no I'm still recording right now, yes. If this was just something I was doing for fun, and, it was completely just documenting the process, that'd be one thing. But my concern with some of that is also that there might be people who will get invested in working on the design with me live, to be honest, and will feel that they are entitled to, to the project in a way that is maybe not mutually agreed upon. So I don't know for a fact that that would happen, but I don't want to have to deal with someone claiming some sort of ownership over the project because they got interested in it and worked on and tried to provide information throughout the entire process of designing the game. And then when I start to go sell the game, because I've made it clear this whole time, I plan on releasing cartridge for sale, and, making the ROM available for sale for people to play, that they somehow are entitled to that. And I know that's like maybe not the most altruistic point of view to take, but at the same time, I want to be in control over that. Like, I want to be in control over who is actually officially involved in the project, because it is my project. And so I honestly just want to avoid any issues with that. Now, that's not saying I wouldn't solicit feedback from people in terms of like playing, a beta build of the game. But that's a really different thing than me sitting here trying to design the game live and someone, providing ideas and input on the way that the game is made. Hopefully I explained that clearly. In that way, this process has been very different from Handmade Hero, because in those episodes, Casey works on the game and then he just does a simple Q&A at the end. Maybe that is the solution, but I also like the fact that during the whole process, I do look at what people are writing and I do interact with people. But, he's very focused on it as a teaching tool, and so he is not soliciting any input in terms of game design or looking at those kinds of opinions or whatever. He is just purely having the stream and the interactivity on the stream for Q&A that he does at the end of the stream. And maybe that's a solution too. If people want me to continue to do these live streams where I'm working on stuff live. All right, well, I'm going to wrap the recording and the stream here. Let me know what you guys think. Collectively, you guys, you supporters and stream co-journeyers, I appreciate any feedback you're willing to provide. Like I've given my reasons several times of why and my thinking. So, I'm curious for the feedback that you'll give me. But I appreciate you being here as throughout the journey. Many of you from the beginning, but also some of you sporadically through the process. And ultimately, I'd like to see this through the end and have this wrap, so that people can actually play the game. So, with that said, reach out to me on Twitter at Clairvis, write me, zelius@gmail.com, comment in the comment section below the recording in YouTube. You can reach me on Discord at Clairvis as well. Yeah. So, thanks for stopping by. This is a comparatively short one, but I look forward to your feedback. And have a good evening. And I'll see you Thursday. Thursday is still the next scheduled stream for us. Okay? Have a good one. Take care.